The blood came before she understood what her body had decided to do. One hand still pressed flat against the ancient border stone, the other lifting slowly to her face. Her fingers came away red. She did not take her hand off the stone.
Lyra.
His voice was rough, not a king's voice. The other one, the one she had only heard in corridors at 3 a.m. Take your hand off the stone. She shook her head. It isn't finished. It's recognizing us. If I stop now... His arms came around her before her knees finished giving. Not the way men catch, the way a wall catches. Already there, no negotiation. Her blood was on his coat. The forest had gone completely silent. She let her head fall against his shoulder. His face was in her hair, and he did not have his composure, and he did not try to find it. For the first time since she had crossed his border, the control was simply gone. He kissed her like a man who had stopped pretending, and then... Hoofbeats. Hard and fast through the trees. The guard pulled up at the edge of the clearing, not dismounting, no time. Your Majesty. One breath. Lady Seraphine, your mate, Your Majesty. She came back this morning. Rowan went still against her. The price of a name. Lyra. The morning they came to buy me, I was standing at the village well with my sister's empty water pail, watching the horizon the way I had learned to watch horizons, like something bad was already on its way. And the only useful thing I could do was see it coming first. They arrived in black, 4 riders, the northern standard on their coats, the wolf's head silver on a field of midnight, the kind of standard that makes village men step back from doorways and village women pull their children inside without explaining why. They did not stop at the well. They came past me close enough that the nearest horse's breath was warm against my cheek, and I did not flinch. Because I had learned young that flinching invites things, and that standing still sometimes does not. The one in front was not the Alpha King. I would learn that later. He was an advisor. A tall, narrow man with a gray streak at his temple and eyes the color of old ice. He had a piece of paper in his hand, and he was reading names off it the way you read a list of grain prices at a market. When he said my father's name, I went very still. My father had been dead for 2 years. The debt he left behind had been alive and growing every single day since. I knew then, before the advisor even looked up from the paper, before he found me with those ice-colored eyes and asked if I was the eldest daughter, before any of it, I knew what kind of morning this was going to be. My name is Lyra Ash. I am 22 years old. I was born in a village so small it does not appear on the northern maps except as a smudge at the edge of the lowlands, where the warm territories end and the wolf country begins. I have one sister. Her name is Marin. She is 16 and she has our mother's eyes and our father's talent for getting into situations that require somebody else to get her out of them. I have been that somebody my entire life. I do not say this bitterly. I say it the way you state a plain fact about the shape of the ground you walk on. It is simply what the ground is like here. The debt was large. The debt involved numbers I had been trying to make work for 2 years with a broken pencil and increasingly creative arithmetic. It did not work. No matter how I moved the numbers around, they always came out the same. The advisor told me the terms, standing in the village square while my neighbors watched from behind their shutters. He was very clear. He was almost gentle, in the way that people are gentle when they believe they are doing you a favor. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories required a wife. Not a mate, a wife. There was a distinction. He had explained this apparently to the men who had arranged this. There was a political arrangement that required a human woman from the old lowland bloodlines, married and in residence at the northern court by the end of the month. In exchange, the debt would be cleared. My sister would be given passage to the eastern schools, where she had been accepted twice and could not afford to go either time. My village would receive winter grain allocation, regardless of harvest failure, for the next 10 years. He looked at me when he finished. He had the expression of a man who expected either tears or argument. I asked him only one thing. When do we leave? Rowan. I felt her cross the border 3 hours before she arrived. This is not unusual for an alpha king. The northern borders are mine, and in a way that goes below the political, below the territorial, into something older, something the wolf carries in the blood like water carries salt. You cannot take it out without changing what it is. What was unusual was what I felt when she crossed. My wolf, who has been a controlled creature my entire adult life, a weapon I have spent 30 years sharpening and 30 years learning to aim, did something he has never done before. He stopped. Not in threat, not in readiness. He stopped the way a man stops when he sees something at the end of a long dark road that he did not know he had been walking toward. I was at my desk when it happened, reading the third draft of the alliance terms that had already killed the first marriage arrangement and badly wounded the second. My advisor Celine had left an hour before. The fire was low. The study was the specific kind of quiet that comes after a long day of people needing things from you that you are not sure you have left to give. And then, the pull, faint. The way a thread is faint when it catches on something in another room, and you feel the smallest tug at the center of your chest, and you stop, and you look down at your hands, and you do not know what just changed. But you know something has. I told myself it was the border wards. I told myself it was the arrangement coming into effect, the political mechanism registering the arrival of the contracted party. I am a man who tells himself a great many things. I did not go to the window. Then I went to the window. She was not visible at that distance. The road winds through the pine forest for 11 miles before it reaches the mountain gates. I stood at the window of my study in the dark and I waited, and I did not ask myself why I was waiting. Celine had given me the girl's information 3 weeks ago. Name, age, village of origin, father's debt, sister's name, Ash. The name is Ash. I had read the information. I had approved the arrangement. I had signed the papers. I had not thought about it again. What Celine did not know, what no one in this court knows, what I have been carrying alone for the entire length of my reign, is what the name Ash means to the wolf bloodlines of this territory, what it means to the old records in the locked room on the 3rd floor that only I have entered in 11 years, what it means to the prophecy that 3 different seers from 3 different traditions have now told me, in different words, that all arrive at the same impossible conclusion. I stood at the window in the dark, and I looked at the road, and I thought, she is not what you told the court she is. And I thought, I am going to have to be very careful. And underneath both of those thoughts, in a place I did not have permission to acknowledge, my wolf pressed his weight against my ribs and said nothing at all. Just leaned, the way a very large creature leans when it has found the wall it intends to stay beside. I pulled the curtain. I went back to my desk. I did not sleep that night. Lyra, the northern court is made of gray stone and old power, and the particular cold that comes from living at altitude for so many generations that the cold has stopped being weather and started being architecture. I arrived at the mountain gates at the hour between dusk and dark, when the sky in the north goes a color I do not have a word for, not purple, not blue, something older than both. The color of a bruise on stone, if stone could bruise. The gates opened before the carriage stopped. I noticed that. I filed it. There were people on the steps, staff from the look of them, arranged in a line the way people arrange themselves when they have been told someone important is arriving and they are not sure yet whether to be pleased about it. There was a woman at the end of the line. She was not arranged. She was simply standing. Dark hair, precise posture, a healer's bag at her hip, the worn leather kind that goes everywhere its owner goes and has been everywhere. She looked at me when I stepped out of the carriage the way a doctor looks at a patient she has already assessed from across the room before she has spoken a word. Her face was controlled. Her eyes were not. Her eyes did something very fast that she covered immediately, something that looked from the outside like someone pushing a door closed on a room that has too much in it. I noted her the way I noted everything. I did not know her name yet. I would learn it was Celine. I did not know then what she was to him. I would learn that too, though not from her and not from him and not as gently as I would have liked. The doors of the court opened, and he was there. He was not standing on the steps with the others. He was in the doorway, the light behind him so that for one moment he was only a shape, tall, still, the weight of him taking up a specific amount of space in a way that had nothing to do with size, and everything to do with the particular gravity of a person who has been in charge of very large things for a very long time. Then I walked up the steps and the light changed and I could see his face. He was looking at me. That was the first thing I noticed. He was looking at me in a way that the advisor had not, in a way that none of the riders had, in a way that the carefully arranged staff had not. He was looking at me like he was seeing something that he had not expected to see. Not attraction, not appraisal, something older than either. He looked at me for 3 full seconds longer than a ruler should look at a girl from a debt-clearing arrangement, arriving in a borrowed dress in a carriage that smelled of pine resin. 3 seconds. Then his eyes moved away, and he murmured something to Kaelin, who was standing at his shoulder. And his face was the face of a king again. Controlled, correct, perfectly held. But I had caught those 3 seconds. I had caught them the way you catch a sound you are not sure you heard, and you stop, and you hold very still, and you wait to find out if the world is going to make it again. I walked up the steps. A single thought sat clear in my chest. Something is already wrong here, and underneath it, I need to find out what. I walked through the doors of the northern court, into the gray stone warmth of it, the torchlight, the smell of pine smoke and old stone. I did not know then that 3 seconds was going to take me years to understand. I only knew that a man who looks at a girl like that does not look at a girl like that by accident. What he wouldn't say. Celine. I had been at this court for 15 years. I had come as my mother's apprentice at 9 years old, and my mother had died when I was 17, and Rowan had kept me on, not from sentiment, though he had felt it, he does feel, he simply does not say so. He had kept me on because I was good, because I knew every healing tradition in the Northern Territories and 3 in the East, because his court needed me. I had told myself this for 15 years, and it was true. It was simply not the whole truth. The whole truth I keep in a room inside myself that I visit rarely, and never for long, because the room has a window that looks out onto a view I cannot afford to look at for too long, or I will not be able to do my work. The view is him. I know Rowan the way you know someone when you have been the one standing in the doorway for 15 years, during every decision, every grief, every cold, quiet evening when the paperwork is done and the court is still, and he pours 2 glasses of wine and hands me one without looking up from the maps. I know the way he moves when he is worried. He goes very still. The way water goes still before it freezes. Not calm, suspended. I know the specific way he holds his jaw when he is being kind to someone at a cost to himself, which he does more than anyone in this court knows, because it does not look like kindness from the outside. It looks like patience. It looks like neutrality. Only I know it is neither. I know that he has nightmares twice a month on average, more in the summer, that he will not discuss with anyone, that leave him standing at his study window before sunrise with his forehead against the cold glass, his breath fogging it, his hand at his side clenching and unclenching. I have left tea outside his door on those mornings for 11 years. He has never mentioned it. I have never asked him to. That is what 15 years looks like from inside it. When the carriage arrived, I was standing in the line with the others, because that is where healers stand at formal arrivals, and I am always where I am supposed to be. It is one of my better qualities, and one of my worse ones. I saw the girl step out of the carriage. She was smaller than I had expected from the file Kaelin had prepared. I do not know what I had expected, something more obvious, something I could dismiss more easily. She was not easily dismissed. Not because she was beautiful in any formal way. She was not. Her clothes were the clothes of someone who had borrowed someone else's idea of court dress and put it on carefully without quite knowing the rules. Her hair was done the way village women do their hair for important occasions, neatly, without the northern style that I have been wearing since I was 12. What was not dismissible was her eyes. Gray. The gray of a winter river carrying everything the hills have shed. Quiet on the surface, the current underneath doing its own work, invisible and constant. She looked at me when she stepped out. Not the way people look at healers, not the professional assessment, not the social calibration. She looked at me the way you look at someone when you have arrived in an unfamiliar place and you are doing the rapid, silent work of figuring out who in this room is going to tell you the truth. I closed my face. I am very good at closing my face, but she had already noted me. I could see it, the small, quiet filing of information behind those river-gray eyes. Then she looked away, toward the doors, toward him. And I watched Rowan's face do something I had not seen it do in 15 years. He looked at her. 3 seconds too long. 3 seconds that felt, from where I was standing, like watching a stone fall before you hear it hit the ground. I had stood in that doorway with him for 100 arrivals, dignitaries, ambassadors, potential allies, potential enemies, the woman who was almost his bride twice. He had looked at none of them like that. I stood in the line of staff with my healer's bag at my hip, and I felt the room inside me, the one with the window, the one I visit rarely, open its door just a little and let in the cold. Rowan. The marriage ceremony was held after the courier riders had returned and the contracts had cleared, because the political arrangement required speed, and because I did not trust myself with more time to think about it. It was a court ceremony, formal, brief, witnessed by the required number of council members and documented in the required number of ways. Kaylin read the terms. We signed the papers. The court physician confirmed the contract was legal and binding. She wore a dress that was not hers. I knew it was not hers, because it sat wrong at the shoulder, 1/2 inch too wide, the way borrowed things always sit at the place the original owner differed from you. She stood through the entire ceremony with her hands still at her sides, and her face composed in the specific way of someone who is composing it on purpose, because the alternative is showing something they have decided they cannot afford to show. I had been standing in front of people requiring things from me for 30 years. I know what that face costs. When Kaylin asked her if she consented to the arrangement, "I do," she answered. Her voice did not shake. It was clear, it was precise. The voice of someone who had made this decision before she arrived and has not revisited it and is not going to. I said my part. She did not look at me when I spoke. She looked at the wall behind me, the appropriate distance, the correct behavior for a contracted wife meeting the terms of an arrangement. When it was over, I walked her to her rooms myself. This was not required. Kaylin's expression as I did it made clear that it was not expected. I did it anyway. Her rooms were in the east wing, the older part of the court. Stone walls and high windows, good light in the morning. I had chosen them myself from the floor plans before she arrived, and I had not examined why I had chosen them. She walked beside me. She was quiet, not the quiet of someone with nothing to say, the other kind, the kind of quiet that is doing something. I had walked several courts in my life beside people who are quiet that way. They are the only people worth talking to. At the door to her rooms I stopped. She stopped. I told her about the East Wing library, that the third door on the right held books in 4 languages, but the histories were all translated. She held my eyes for the first time since the ceremony began. "Thank you." 2 words. And there was a question in those gray eyes she had not asked out loud. Not the question I expected. Not why did you choose me, not what do you want from this, not what am I supposed to do now. The question in her eyes was, what are you not telling me? I held her gaze for 3 seconds, exactly long enough to tell her nothing and have her know it. A quiet good night, and I turned, walking back down the corridor, my hands behind my back, my step even, my face correct. I did not look back. I am very disciplined. I am not sure I have ever been quite that disciplined in my life. The library door. Lyra. Some weeks into my stay at the Northern Court, I began to understand I was being watched. Not in a threatening way, not the way I was watched in my village by the debt collectors, by the men on certain roads. Not that kind of watching. This was quieter. The girl who brought my breakfast always brought it at the exact time I had accidentally revealed by being hungry enough to go looking for food on the third morning. A mistake I did not make again. The library books, the ones I had pulled from the shelves on the first afternoon, were replaced each night by different ones on the same subject, as if someone was tracking what I was reading and deciding what to put next. The fire in my room was always exactly the right size for how cold the night had been. Not more, not less. Someone was paying attention to how cold the nights were running. I tested it one morning. I deliberately took a book on Northern military history back to my room and left it on my desk, open to a page on the old wolf bloodlines, the ones that predated the current ruling families. The next morning, the book was gone, and in its place was a different book, a slim volume on Northern botany, with a handwritten note inside the front cover in handwriting that was not Kaylin's. It said only, "This one is better." I sat with that note for a long time. It was his handwriting. I had seen his signature on the marriage papers. I knew the shape of his letters. He had been in my room while I slept and replaced a book about his bloodlines with a book about plants, and left a note that told me nothing except that he had been there and had decided what I should read instead, and thought the replacement was an improvement. I read the botany book cover to cover. I learned more about northern plants than I expected. I also spent a great deal of time thinking about a man who comes into a room in the dark and changes what a woman is allowed to read. On the 14th morning, I was at the East Wing Library reading one of the histories that was translated into my language, sitting in the window seat with the morning light good on the pages, when I heard his step in the corridor. I had learned his step by then. It is a particular step. The step of a man who walks like every surface he crosses belongs to him, not arrogantly, just accurately, because it does. He stopped at the library door. He did not knock. The door was open. He looked in. I did not look up from the book. After a moment, his voice carried across the room. "You found the window seat." Still without looking up. "It has good light." He came in, not all the way. He stood near the shelves, one hand on the spine of a book he did not pull out, looking at the spine of it the way you look at something when you are not actually looking at that thing. Complete. In what way? I closed the book on my finger to keep my place. The records of the old bloodlines before the Consolidation Wars stop in the middle of several family lines. The Ashburn line, the Grey Vein line, the Arrowwood line. All three stop mid-generation with no explanation given. No note of extinction, no record of the families leaving the territory. They simply stop being recorded, as if someone decided they were no longer worth recording. Silence. I looked up then. He was looking at me, not at the book spine anymore, at me. The way he had looked at me on the steps that first evening. His face was doing the controlled thing, the correct thing, but underneath it, somewhere behind his eyes, something had moved. His answer came carefully that those were old records, that some gaps were simply the result of incomplete archiving. I did not let it go. The gaps are very precise. They all occur in the same decade, from the same archivist, who clearly kept very detailed records everywhere else. Incomplete archiving does not look like that. It looks like missing pages. Selective silence looks like what's in those books. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "You should come to the morning council session today. You will need to understand how the court operates." It was not an answer to what I had said. It was a door closed on a room that had briefly opened. "All right." He turned to leave. I stopped him with one more sentence. "The botany book was better. You were right about that." He stopped. He did not turn around, but I saw something happen in the line of his shoulders. I thought it might be. He left. I looked back at the history, at the precise, clean gap where the Ash family line ended mid-sentence. In a decade, someone had worked very hard to make unremarkable. "My name is Lyra Ash." I thought about that for a long time. Celine. I watched the morning ritual for 3 weeks before I understood what it was. He walked past the East Wing Library every morning at the same time. He had done this for years. His morning route through the court was not a new thing. The library had always been on the path between his study and the council chamber. What was new was that he stopped. Every morning. He stopped at the library door for varying lengths of time, sometimes a few minutes, sometimes longer. I knew because I walked the same corridor on my way from the healing rooms to the kitchens. I had walked it for 15 years. I knew every stone of it. I knew the timing of his footsteps, when he was on it and when he was not. I started paying attention to the length of the stops. 3 minutes, 7 minutes, 11 minutes. I started arriving at the corridor at different times, testing the pattern, building the shape of it in my head the way I build the shape of a patient's symptoms before I name the illness. On the 19th morning, I arrived at the corridor just in time to see him come out of the library and walk toward the council chamber. He was not looking at the floor. He was not looking at the walls. He was looking slightly upward, the way a person looks when they are carrying something in their chest that is lighter than what was there before. I had not seen him look that way in a very long time. I stood in the corridor with my healer's bag at my hip, and I felt the room inside me open the window, just a little, just enough for the cold to come in fully and stay. The girl in the portrait. Lyra. Turned a corner and looked at me, not in the way of someone startled by my appearance, in the way of someone who has seen my face somewhere else. Not this face specifically. The shape of it, the line of the jaw, the way my eyes sit in my head. Something about all of it together that made her go white and reach for the wall, and then collect herself with the visible effort of someone who has been trained to have no visible reactions to anything. I helped her pick up the tray. A quiet question. Are you all right? A quieter answer. Yes, my lady. I am sorry, my lady. I was clumsy. She did not look at me again. She left as fast as she could without running, because running would have been noticed. This was the 4th time in 3 weeks a servant had reacted to my face in a way that required careful covering. The first time, I thought it was nerves. The second time, I thought it was the lighting. The third corridor had unusual torchlight. Things looked different there. The third time, I stopped making excuses. The fourth time, I made a different kind of note. I started paying attention to which servants reacted, to which parts of the court they worked in, to how long they had been at this court. Only the older ones reacted, the ones who had been here the longest, the ones who would have been here before I arrived, before the marriage arrangement, before any of this. They reacted to my face as if they had seen it before, as if my face was a face that belonged to a story they had been told not to tell. That evening I went to the library. I did not read history. I sat in the window seat and I looked at my own hands, and I thought about a name that stopped being recorded mid-sentence. In a decade someone had worked very hard to make unremarkable. Ash. What did they do to make us unremarkable? What did they hide? He knows. I was certain of it by then. I had been building toward that certainty for 3 weeks. Every stopped door, every replaced book, every 3-second look on the steps was pointing at the same conclusion. He knows what I am, or what I am from, or what my face means to the people in this court who are old enough to have a reason to recognize it. And he has not told me. I sat in the window of the library in the North Country, in the court of the man I had married before I arrived, in a dress that was not mine, and I thought about what kind of man keeps that kind of secret. I thought about the botany book and the note in his handwriting, and the morning stops at the library door, and the specific quality of his restraint, the way it felt. Not like a man keeping a prisoner, but like a man keeping something safe. I thought about the difference between those two things and how you tell them apart from inside. I did not have an answer. I went to bed. I lay in the dark and I listened to the mountain wind push against the stone walls of my East Wing room, and I thought about what my mother had told me before she died, when she was already feverish and most of what she said I had filed under fever speech. She had taken my hand. She had spoken slowly, the way you speak when each word costs you breath. Lyra, if you are ever in a place that feels old, if you are ever in a place where the ground remembers, listen to what it remembers, you will hear it. You always have. I did not know what to tell you about it when you were small. I did not know how to explain what you were hearing. I had held her hand and told her it was all right, Mama, and that she should rest now. I had filed it under fever speech. I lay in the dark of the East Wing and I wondered if I had filed it wrong. Rowan. The council meeting later that week was the first time she sat in the room. Celine had suggested it 3 weeks prior. I had delayed it twice. I had reasons for both delays that were good reasons, that were also not the real reason. The real reason I needed to know, before she sat in that room, how much she already knew. The real reason. I am not accustomed to not being the person who controls what information enters a situation. She sat at the far end of the council table as an observer, which is the protocol for a new court member learning procedure. She had a small notebook, a worn leather one, the kind she had brought from the village, one of 3 things I had counted that she brought with her from her previous life. A notebook, a small knife in a worn sheath that I had noted and not confiscated, and a single dried herb bundle tied with gray thread that smelled of her village, that she kept on the windowsill of her room. I know this because I have been in her room. I replaced the book. I left the note. I do not examine this behavior with great care. She sat at the end of the table and she listened to nearly 2 hours of territorial border disputes, grain supply chain assessments, and the early reports from the Eastern delegation on the matter of the collapsed alliance that had been the political reason for the marriage arrangement in the first place. She did not ask any questions. Protocol for an observer is silence. She kept it. But I watched her notebook. She wrote constantly, not in the way of someone transcribing, in the way of someone who thinks with a pen in her hand, who is connecting what she hears in the room to what she already knows and working out what the connections mean. After the meeting, when the council had filed out and only Celine remained making his notes at the far end, she was the last to leave. At the door she stopped. Her voice came over her shoulder, not turning around. The Eastern delegation collapsed because the alliance terms required the Eastern territories to cede water rights to the northern mountain rivers before the northern territories had completed the border stabilization that would have made the water access meaningful to the east. Someone made the cession terms before the stabilization was ready, either because they did not understand what they were ceding or because they did. And they wanted the alliance to fail. She turned then and looked at me directly, the way she had not done consistently since the ceremony. Which was it? I held her gaze. That is a good question. I know it is. She left. Celine looked at me with the expression he wears when he is reconsidering a previous assessment. Where did we find her again? He asked. She found us? I gathered my papers. I walked to the window. I looked at the mountain road below, the place where the pines thin before the gates, the place I had been standing at the window looking at on the night she crossed the border and my wolf had stopped inside my chest for the first time in 30 years. I thought about a girl who could read a collapsed alliance from listening to an hour of border disputes, and work out before the council had finished filing out what it had taken my council 6 months to name. I thought about her bloodline, what it means, what the old records say about the women of the Ash line, what they could feel, what they could read in a room, in a person, in a kingdom. I thought about the prophecy. One woman will save the kingdom. One woman will destroy it. And nobody knows which one is which. I thought about a dried herb bundle on an East Wing windowsill that smelled of a village that was now grain secured for 10 years, because its eldest daughter had said, "When do we leave?" and meant it. I thought about the difference between a woman who is dangerous and a woman who is afraid of being dangerous. I did not look away from the window for a very long time. The things he noticed. Rowan. She stopped eating later that autumn. Not entirely. She ate breakfast, she ate enough at the evening meal that no one watching casually would have noticed anything. I was not watching casually. She stopped eating at midday, which was when she had, in the first 3 weeks, eaten the most. The village in her, the body that had learned to eat when food was available because availability was not a given. She stopped eating at midday and she started spending the time instead at the window in the library, or walking the outer corridor that looks east toward the mountains. Not the comfortable mountains, the far ones, the ones you can barely see in good weather. In bad weather, they disappear entirely. I recognized what I was seeing. I had seen it before, in my own mirror, in the months after my father died, when the court was new to me and very large and I was 22, and I did not know that asking for help was a thing a person could do in this particular room. She was homesick, not for the village. I had read enough about the village to know she was not homesick for the ground of it. She was homesick for her sister, for the specific shape of being responsible for another person, which is a strange thing to be homesick for, unless you've spent your entire life being responsible for someone and then stopped, suddenly, in a gray stone court in the North Country, where the mountains eat the horizon and there is no one who needs anything from you. I dealt with this the way I deal with most things, indirectly, carefully, at a remove that lets both parties retain their dignity. I had Marin's first letter from the Eastern schools delivered to the East Wing Library by the morning girl, without explanation, placed on the window seat. I sent a message through Kaylin's office to the Eastern schools, asking them to expedite the weekly letter service to the Northern Court for correspondence from one specific student. I went to the midday kitchens and told the head cook, without explanation, that the East Wing window seat would benefit from a small tray at midday, bread and soft cheese, and the small northern honey cakes that Lyra had once taken 2 of at the evening meal, and then not taken again, because I think she had not wanted to seem hungry in front of the council. Martha, the head cook, looked at me the way old women look at men they have known since those men were boys. A simple nod from her. I will see to it. She did not ask who it was for. Old women who have worked in king's courts for 30 years know who it is for. Some days later, Lyra was in the library at midday when the girl brought the tray, and on the tray was her sister's letter. I was passing the corridor. I was not stopping, I was passing. I heard her make a sound. A small involuntary sound. The sound a person makes when something arrives they have been quietly desperate for and have not let themselves admit they were desperate for. I did not stop walking. I am a very disciplined man. I made it approximately 11 paces past the library door before I stopped. I stood in the corridor for a moment. Then I went back and stood in the doorway. She was sitting in the window seat, her sister's letter in her hands, her face doing something it usually did not do in rooms I was in. It was open, not performing, not composed, not the careful face of the contracted wife doing her job correctly, just her face. She looked up. She had not heard me stop in the doorway, because the east wing is old stone and the old stone swallows footsteps. She looked up and she saw me, and her face did not close the way it usually closed when she caught me looking at her. She just looked back. We looked at each other for a moment that was not 3 seconds or 11 seconds. It was longer than that, the kind of moment that does not have a number, because numbers are for things that occur inside the normal flow of time, and this was not that. The letter was still open in her hands. She likes it there. The light is good for studying in the evenings. A simple word from me, good, she said to thank you. She knows it wasn't the arrangement that got her in. She got herself in both times. But she knows the coin that finally opened the door came from this direction. She said to say thank you. Something in my chest did something I did not have permission to call what it was. Tell her she is welcome. I left. I went directly to my study. I sat down at my desk. I picked up the nearest report. I put it down again. I sat with my hands flat on the desk for approximately 4 minutes doing nothing, which is an extremely unusual activity for me. Then I picked up the report. I read it, I signed it, I moved to the next one. My wolf at the bottom of my ribs was doing the leaning thing again. I allowed it. I did not examine it. Lyra, I want to tell you about the night of the storm. It was a night in the deep weeks of autumn. The mountain storms in the north are not like lowland storms. They do not build over hours. They arrive the way bad news arrives in the middle of the night, suddenly, completely, without the courtesy of warning. This one arrived at 3 a.m. The sound of it woke me the way things that are very large sometimes wake you before you understand why. Some animal part of the brain that lives below thought, below language, registers the wrongness of the air and pulls you out of sleep with both hands. I sat up in the dark. I could hear the mountain. The stone walls carried the sound of it, not through the walls, through the stone itself. It was not sound the way sound usually is. It was vibration. It was the whole building remembering it was a mountain, and the mountain was alive. I was not afraid. I was not afraid in the way you are not afraid when you have been more afraid than this so many times that your body has recalibrated its scale. I got up, put on the wool robe that had appeared in my wardrobe without explanation sometime in the second week, lit a candle, and went to the window. The storm was enormous. The kind that turns the mountain peaks white even in late autumn, the kind that the northern wolves, I had heard the stable hands say, ran toward instead of away from. I stood at the window watching the storm do what it was doing to the mountains, which was considerable. I did not hear him in the corridor. I heard him stop outside my door. The door did not open. He stood there the way he sometimes stood in library doorways, without coming in or going away. I stood at the window with my candle on my side of the door. He stood in the corridor in the dark on his side. I do not know how long. We did not speak. We did not need to speak. After a while, the storm's worst hour passed, the way storm's worst hours do, not ending but becoming more manageable, the way very large, hard things do not stop. They simply settle into a size you can stand beside without being knocked over. I heard him move, the sound of him turning to walk back down the corridor. A whisper through the wood between us. "Thank you." He stopped. He did not answer for a moment. Then his voice came back through the door, just as quiet, the stone carrying it the same way it had carried the storm. "Sleep now." And he went. I stood at the window with my candle until the storm settled into ordinary night rain, and then I went back to bed and lay in the dark, and thought about a man who stands outside a door in a storm to make sure a woman he is not touching is not alone in it. I thought about what kind of man that is. I thought about all the things I still did not know about him, which was many things. I thought about all the things I was beginning to know about him, which was also many things, and which contradicted every story I had been told about what powerful men were like. I went to sleep in the safe stone room of the man who had married me to save his kingdom, or to protect me from something he had not named, or both, possibly both. I did not know yet, but I was beginning to believe it was worth finding out. The locked wing. Lyra. One late afternoon, I found the locked room. I was not looking for it. I want to be clear about this, because in the stories there is always a woman who cannot resist, who goes looking and finds the thing and breaks the story open with her own curiosity. I was not looking. I was lost. The north wing of the court is older than the rest, and the corridors in it do not follow the logic of the east and west wings. They follow an older logic, the logic of a building that was built before straight lines were considered a courtesy to the people who would have to navigate it. I had taken a wrong turn following a window that had caught light at an angle I had not seen before, and I came around a corner and the corridor ended in a plain stone wall with a single door that was, unlike every other door in the court, without a handle. Not locked, without a handle, sealed, the way something is sealed when the person who sealed it wanted to be sure no one opened it by accident. I stood in front of it for a long time. I put my hand flat on the stone beside the door the way my mother had said. Listen to what it remembers. The stone was cold. Stone is cold? That is not remarkable. What was remarkable was that I heard something. I do not mean heard with my ears. I mean heard the way you hear when a piece of music moves through you before you have identified what instrument is playing. A frequency that bypasses the part of you that has words for things and goes directly to the part of you that simply knows. The room behind that door was full of something. The way rooms get full when they have been holding something for a very long time, alone. I heard it. I stood there and I heard it. And my hand on the stone felt warm in a way stone does not feel warm. I took my hand away. I turned around. I walked back down the corridor, back through the north wing, back toward the east wing, back toward my rooms. I did not go back to that corridor for several mornings. Some days later, I went back. He was already there. He was standing in front of the door with his hand flat on the stone, almost exactly where my hand had been. He did not hear me coming, which should not have been possible. An alpha king with the territorial instincts of everything his blood contains should have heard me 2 corridors away. He was that far inside whatever he was feeling, standing at that door, that he did not hear me until I was beside him. He turned. He was not startled. He was, for one moment, simply caught, the way you catch a person doing the thing they do alone that they do not do in front of anyone. Then his face closed. His voice was even, "You should not be in this corridor." I did not move. There is no sign forbidding it. I am telling you now. I looked at the door, then at him. "What is in there?" He said nothing. I held the silence between us until I could not any more. I heard it. Whatever is in that room, I can hear it. I heard it before, with my hand on the stone beside the door. I heard it this morning from the corridor. I am hearing it now. He was looking at me the way he had looked at me on the steps on the first night. The recognition and the calculation and something underneath both that I still did not have a name for. "What do you hear?" I did not have a clean answer. I do not have words for it. It is not that kind of hearing. It is more like standing beside a river you cannot see and knowing by the sound of it how large it is and how cold and how deep. He held my gaze. His jaw was working the way jaws work when a person is deciding how much of something they are going to say. "Come away from this corridor." A small, careful question. Is that an order? It is a request. I thought about that. I thought about the difference between a man who orders and a man who asks, and whether I had believed this particular man to be the ordering kind. All right. I walked back down the corridor. He walked beside me, not ahead of me, beside me, his hands behind his back, his step even, his face doing the controlled thing. At the place where the north wing joins the east wing, he stopped. His voice was low, eyes on the wall. "I will explain the room when I can explain it fully, without creating more questions than I answer." A quiet observation from me. That is a very careful way of not telling me anything. Yes. How long will that take? I do not know yet. I looked at him. All right. I turned and walked toward my rooms. I heard him stay in the corridor behind me a long time after I turned the corner. The woman at the window. Celine. I made my decision on a night in the deep cold. I want to tell you how I arrived at it, because I need you to understand that I did not arrive at it easily, that I am not a person who arrives at things like this easily, that the person who arrived at this decision was a person I had spent 15 years believing I was not capable of becoming. I had been watching for 6 weeks, doing what I do with every situation I encounter, building the picture from the evidence, naming the illness before it progresses. The evidence was this. He walked past the library every morning. He stopped. He had the grain routes to her village secured beyond the terms of the arrangement. I had seen the secondary letters in the council dispatch box 3 weeks in. The arrangement required 10 years of grain. He had secured 20, without announcement, without explanation. The storm. I had been awake during the storm. I am almost always awake during storms. I had watched from my window as he walked from his study to the east wing and stood in the corridor outside our rooms for a long time, and then walked back. The length of it, in a storm, standing in a corridor outside the rooms of a woman he was not supposed to be attached to. And the room on the 3rd floor. I did not know she had found it. I would learn that later. I knew he had been going to it more frequently. I kept track of such things. I have kept track of such things for 15 years. It is part of what I do. It is how I know this court and everyone in it, including the man who runs it. The room on the 3rd floor holds the old records, the sealed ones, the ones that document the Ash Bloodline before the Consolidation Wars, before the names stopped being recorded, before someone decided that certain families were better kept in a room with no handle. He had been going to that room twice a week for the 6 weeks she had been here. He had gone 4 times in 11 years before she arrived. The picture was complete. He was falling. Not the way men fall when they want something. The other way, the way that is much more dangerous, the way that rearranges the order of everything inside a person so that a different thing becomes the thing they cannot function without. He was falling, and he did not know what she was yet. Or he did not know how to tell her what she was without losing the specific thing he was most afraid of losing. I had been in his study 15 years ago when the seer came. I had stood at the back of the room and heard the prophecy, the way I heard everything in that room, completely and in silence. One woman will save the kingdom. One woman will destroy it. I had told myself for 15 years that I was the first woman, the one who saves. I had been here. I had known everything. I had maintained everything. I had kept this court running through 2 political crises and 1 succession threat, and the winter the fever took 40 people, when I was the one who did not sleep for the length of it until it was over. I had told myself I was the one who saves. And she had been here for 6 weeks, and he had already begun the process of rearranging himself around her. I thought about the prophecy. I thought about the room with no handle. I thought about the girl who had walked in from a village with gray eyes and a worn notebook and a dried herb bundle on her windowsill. What if she is the one who destroys? If she is the one who destroys, it has already begun, and the only person who can stop it is standing in her own room at 2 in the morning looking at a small box at the back of her wardrobe that holds things she should not have been keeping. I am a healer. I know what ends things. I know what I have in the cabinet beside my bed, in the small brown bottles that look like all the other small brown bottles, and do what no one is supposed to know they can do. I am a healer. I know how healers think about harm, about protection, about the line between the two. I stood in my room at 2 in the morning for a very long time. Then I went to my cabinet. I took out a small brown bottle. I sat on the edge of my bed and held it in both hands. I sat there until dawn began at the window. I did not pour it out. I also did not open it. I was not ready yet to know which one I was. Firelight. Lyra. There was an evening later that winter that I have returned to many times since. In the way you return to a place in your memory, not because it was the most dramatic, not because it was the most obvious, but because it was the truest. We were in the library. This had become a thing that happened, not by agreement, not by arrangement, simply by both of us arriving in the same room at the same hour enough times that our presence there together had become as unremarkable as the shelves in the window seat. He read. I read. Sometimes we spoke about what we were reading, about what we had learned in the council that day, about the water rights dispute that had been before the council for a month with no resolution in sight. He spoke first that evening, eyes still on the page. The Eastern delegation returns next week. They will want concessions on the border markers before they agree to the new alliance terms. A simple answer from me, just as quiet, they will not get them. No, I closed the book on my finger. The border markers are not the real issue. The real issue is that the Eastern Pax Alpha does not trust the commitment. He was at the court when the first alliance collapsed. He was there when the terms were written. He knows the terms were written to fail. He is not going to sign a new version of the same terms, no matter how the language changes, unless someone offers him something that cannot be taken back. He was looking at me, a genuine concession, something that costs, something that demonstrates that this court is willing to risk something real for the alliance to succeed. His question came carefully. What would you offer? I do not know enough about what this court values most to know what would constitute a genuine sacrifice. I know what it costs to give things up. I know what genuine concession looks like from the receiving end. I do not yet know enough about the offering end. He was quiet for a moment. What did your father give up that felt genuine to you? Nothing. What should he have? I thought about this. He should have stopped when we told him we were afraid. He should have looked at his daughters and understood that the size of our fear was a signal that something was wrong with what he was doing. He should have let that matter more than what he was trying to get. Silence. The fire in the library grate had burned down to a good warm glow, the kind of fire that makes a room feel smaller than it is in a way that is not threatening, just close. His voice came after a long moment, low and certain. He did not see you clearly. No. That was his failure, not yours. I looked at him. He was not looking at the fire. He was looking at me, and his face had the quality I had begun to recognize as what his face looked like when it was being honest, when it was not performing kingship, not performing control, not performing anything. It was a quieter face than the one the court usually got. You see people clearly. I have noticed that about you. You do not always respond to what you see, but you see it. A small admission from him, not always. More often than most. A pause. His voice came back, careful and measured. You see things in rooms. I have noticed that. You have been in that council chamber 8 times, and you have already mapped every advisor's tells. You know who is loyal out of conviction and who is loyal out of habit, and who is loyal out of calculation, and you have not said so to anyone. I did not think it was my place. It is your place. He spoke it with a certainty I did not expect. Simple, direct, the statement of a fact, not a kindness. He was close, the way people get close in firelit rooms when the conversation has been going for 2 hours and neither person has noticed the distance narrowing. His hand was on the arm of the chair beside me, not on my hand, on the arm of the chair, but close enough that the warmth of it was the kind of warmth that is very difficult to attribute entirely to the fire. His voice came again, even quieter. The Eastern Alpha's name is Calder. He has a daughter. She is 17. She has been promised to a pack in the West. The promise was made by her mother before she died. Calder honors it. But it costs him every political alliance he might otherwise build, because the Western pack is not a strong alliance. It costs him politically to honor it. He honors it anyway. So he is a man who keeps his word when it costs him. He is. Then you offer him something that is difficult to keep, and keep it, and let him watch you keep it over time. He will trust that. He cannot trust terms on paper. He can trust behavior over time. He looked at me. His hand was still on the chair arm. That is what I have been trying to tell the council for 3 months. Tell them again. They do not listen to me on this. Tell them it came from the Eastern Delegation Review. Tell them it came from the pattern analysis. Tell them anything. Tell them it came from the botany book if necessary. Just tell them. And something happened in his face. Something fractured very briefly in the controlled surface of it. Something almost like a smile, not quite, but the shadow of one. The shape of what a smile is made of before a smile happens. His hand on the chair arm moved less than an inch toward mine on the armrest beside it. His fingers, not touching mine, adjacent to mine. The space between them, the kind of space that is not very much space, but is also the most important space in the room. We sat like that for a moment that was too long to be accidental and too short to be anything I could name with certainty. Then he stood up. He was very tall when he stood up. He always was, but in a firelit library at the end of a long evening, it registered differently. His good night came lower than his usual voice by a register I could not pretend not to notice. A simple good night from me in return. He picked up the book he had been reading. He had not looked at it in the long quiet of the conversation. He walked to the door. At the door he stopped. He did not turn around. His last words came over his shoulder. The library is yours whenever you want it. He left. I sat in the firelit room alone, with my hand on the chair arm and the warmth where his hand had nearly been, and I thought about a man who stands outside doors in storms, who replaces books in the night, who says it is your place with the certainty of a plain fact. I thought about what it meant that I had stopped being afraid of him. Somewhere in the weeks before, I could not name the specific day, but the specific day had passed. And what I felt now, in the firelit library with the warmth of the nearly touch, was not afraid. I thought about the room on the 3rd floor, the one with no handle. I thought about what might be in it that he had been going to twice a week since I arrived. I thought about the 3-second look on the steps on the first night, and I thought about all the versions of it I had seen since in corridors and council chambers and library doorways. I need to know what is in that room. I also need to be careful about what knowing it costs. I sat in the library until the fire burned completely down, and then I went to bed, and I did not sleep for a long time. The Alpha married me to save his kingdom, then hid me from his mate. Part 2. What was said in council, Lyra. It happened in council on a gray morning when the snow was thinking about starting and had not yet decided. I had been observing in the council chamber for nearly 2 months by then. I had a place at the far end of the long table, not at the table beside it, in the row of chairs the protocol gave to apprentices and observers, and the secretaries who took the formal record. I sat where I always sat. I had my notebook open on my knee. I had stopped expecting anything in particular from any given session. Most council mornings ended the way most council mornings began. Careful men saying careful things to each other in language designed to be deniable later. That morning was not careful. Celine was reading the Eastern delegation's response to the new alliance proposal. Rowan was at the head of the table. I was making a note in the margin of a previous report, when a voice came from the middle of the table, older, calm, deliberate. The kind of voice that has been speaking in this room for 30 years and does not raise itself because it does not need to. It belonged to a man named Varric. Of all the council members I had not yet learned, Varric was the one I had already learned. He was a man in his late 60s, white hair, heavy gold ring on his right hand, quiet smile that he used only when he had decided something. I had heard his name in 3 of Rowan's late-night reports. He was the senior counselor. He held the Eastern Records portfolio. He had served Rowan's father before Rowan, and Rowan's father had inherited him from his father before that. He set down the paper he had been holding. His voice came across the chamber, slow and reasonable. If the council is going to formalize the position of a foreign-born consort as an active participant in Eastern Alliance negotiations, then the council needs to address something that has not been addressed since this woman entered our hall. We need to address the matter of her name. The room went still, not slowly, all at once. The way rooms go still when one man at the table has just opened a door other men at the table have been keeping closed for a long time. Celine's hand stopped moving on the paper he was annotating. Rowan did not move. He did not turn his head. He did not lift his eyes from the document on the desk in front of him. The only thing in his face that registered the new direction of the room was a small change in the line of his jaw that I had learned to recognize. Varric continued. His voice was warm, almost paternal. That was the dangerous thing about it. The bloodline this council records under the surname Ash has been formally absent from Northern Territory for 200 years. The records of why are sealed. Most of this council has not read them. I have read them. I read them when I was a young secretary, before this council began to lock its archives the way it locks them now. The reason that bloodline was removed from the records in summary was that the women of the line presented a pattern of resistance to the centralizing authority of the consolidation councils. They saw what they were not asked to see. They reported what they were not asked to report. They formed alliances outside the chain of command. They were a complication. The council of the time made a decision. I am not here to defend that decision. I am here to say that this council is now seated across the table from another woman of that line, and we have not had the conversation about whether the original concerns are still valid. He looked down the table at me. He smiled, the small, quiet smile. I do not believe Lady Lyra is here in bad faith. I want the record to show that I do not. I am simply asking the council to acknowledge what we are doing when we formalize her position. We are not seating an apprentice. We are seating a member of a bloodline that this institution removed from itself. There were reasons. The chamber was very quiet. I felt every eye come to me at once. Not the way they had come to me when I was an observer. The way eyes come to a person who has just been put on the floor of a council she has no formal speaking right in. Celine turned in his chair toward Rowan. He waited for Rowan to speak. Rowan did not speak. He did not look at me. He did not look at Varric. His eyes stayed on the document in front of him. The line of his jaw had not changed again, which meant he was holding something in that he had decided not to release into the room. Varric had timed it perfectly. Council protocol required Rowan to rule on a procedural challenge before debate could continue. Rowan could rule against Varric. But the moment he did, every counselor in the room would understand that the king had publicly defended an Ash woman against the senior counselor for personal reasons. The political cost would land on me. It would land on me harder than it would land on Rowan. And Rowan would know that. And Varric would know that Rowan knew that. And the silence at the head of the table was the sound of a king understanding that he had been outmaneuvered by a man who had been outthinking him in this chamber for 30 years. Rowan had 3 seconds to choose. I made the choice for him. I closed my notebook. I set it on the chair beside me. I stood up. The chamber did the second silence, different from the first, the silence that happens when an observer who was not invited to speak has just stood up. The chamber did the second silence, different from the first, the silence that happens when an observer who was not invited to speak has just stood up. I walked from my chair at the end of the room to the center of the floor. I did not walk fast. I did not walk slow. I walked the way I had walked into the village square the morning the riders came, which was the only walk I knew for situations where every option was bad, and I had decided to pick the one I could live inside. I stopped at the foot of the table. I looked at Varric. When I spoke, my voice came out steadier than I had any reasonable right to expect, and I will tell you honestly, I did not know whose voice it was for the first 3 words. It was not the voice I had used in this room before. It was the voice of someone older than me, who had been through this conversation before, who had been waiting underneath my ribs my whole life for the chance to come up. You have read the sealed records. That was a statement, not a question. He nodded once. Then you have read the names of the men who signed the order. There were 7. I have read them too. 3 of those 7 men have direct descendants on this council today, including yourself. The room did not move. I was not going to look at Rowan. I was not going to look at Celine. I had decided that on my walk to the floor. Looking at either of them would have made this a personal defense. I needed it to be the other thing. The original concerns the Consolidation Council named are in the record as written. I have read the language. The concerns were that women of my line saw what they were not asked to see, reported what they were not asked to report, and formed alliances outside the chain of command. Those are the words. I am quoting them. I want to ask the Council openly, in this session, on the formal record, are those still concerns this Council holds? If they are, I would like to know now. I would prefer to know now. I am not going to be useful to the alliance work this court is asking me to be useful to if there are men at this table who believe the original order should not have been undone. I am not afraid of that conversation. I am asking for it. If they are not concerns this council holds, if this council in this generation would not sign that order again, then I would like that on the formal record as well, so that we can move forward without the senior counselor reopening the question every time my position comes up for review. I stopped. I waited. I had not looked at Rowan once. The silence that came next was not like either of the silences before it. It was the silence of a room where a thing had just been done that the room had not seen done before. by a foreign-born consort, in front of a senior counselor, on the floor of a chamber she had no speaking right in. Varric's quiet smile had gone away. He looked at me for a long moment, then he looked at Rowan. Rowan's eyes had finally come up off the document. He was looking at me, not at Varric, at me. His face was the face I had seen once before, in the doorway of the locked wing corridor, the morning he turned and saw me beside him and was for one moment caught. I had not expected to see it again. I certainly had not expected to see it across a council chamber in front of 17 of his most senior advisors. He stood the way alphas stand when they have been forced to be alphas in the next 60 seconds, and have decided to be alphas of a different kind than the room expected. His voice came out of him very even. The council will enter the formal record. Lady Lyra Ash is a member of this court by marriage and by blood. The original order against her line is repudiated by this generation of this council. Anyone who wishes to dissent from that repudiation may do so in writing, signed and dated, and submit it to the secretary by the end of the week. He paused. His voice came back, lower. The counselors at the far end of the table leaned forward slightly to hear him. He did not speak louder. He let them lean. For the avoidance of doubt, anyone who submits a dissent will have it read aloud by the secretary in this chamber on the formal record in front of his colleagues, so that we know who at this table believes the old order should be reinstated, and so that the rest of us can plan accordingly. The room went very, very still. Varric did not move. He had not lost. He had not won. He had been moved into a position where he could not write the dissent he had been about to weaponize, because he could not survive the consequences of having his name read aloud in front of the men whose grandfathers had signed alongside his grandfather 200 years ago. He had built a careful trap. Rowan had picked it up, turned it sideways, and handed it back to him with his name on the outside. Celine made a note in the formal record. Rowan sat down. The session continued. I walked back to my chair at the end of the room. I sat down. I picked up my notebook. I opened it to the page I had been writing on when Varric spoke, and I made one additional note in the margin in handwriting I could not quite control. I do not remember anything else that was said in council that morning. I do remember that when the session ended and the counselors filed out, Varric passed me at the door. He did not look at me. He did not nod. He walked past, and I felt the air around him move the way air moves around a man who is rearranging the next 2 months of his life in the time it takes to cross a doorway. Celine stayed at the far end of the table making his end-of-session notes. He did not look up when I walked past him. The corner of his mouth did something that was not a smile. Rowan was gone. He had left the chamber by the side door before the counselors had finished filing out the main one. I knew where he had gone. I did not have to think about it. I went down the corridor toward the east wing. I was not going to look for him. I was not going to chase him. I was going to my own room because my hands were shaking and I needed to be somewhere where they could shake without being a piece of evidence on someone's report. I did not get to my room. He stepped out of an alcove in the corridor before I reached the east wing turn, and he did not say anything, and his face was not the face he had worn at the table. His face was the face of a man who had just spent 40 minutes being a king with absolute precision, and had walked off the floor of his own chamber, and had not yet finished being whatever he was when he was not the king. He looked at me. He did not speak. His chest was moving in the way chests move when a person has been holding their breathing flat in a room and is now in a corridor where nobody is watching. His hand came up. The back of his fingers, not the palm, touched the line of my jaw very briefly, the way a man touches a thing to be sure it is still there. Then his hand fell. He took a step back. He turned his head away. He put one hand against the wall of the corridor, flat, the way a man steadies himself on a wall when his legs have made a decision he was not asked to consult on. His voice came out of him rough. Not loud. Rough. I almost did not stop him in time. I knew what he meant. I did not need him to say more. I almost did not stop Varric before he stopped. He could not finish the sentence. I had never seen him not finish a sentence. He stopped. He could not finish the sentence. He pressed his forehead against the cold stone of the wall for 1 second. Then he straightened. He turned back to me. His face was already coming back, the architecture reassembling, the king coming back up over the man and settling like a coat being put on. When he spoke again, his voice was almost level. I am sorry I did not move faster. I held his eyes. You moved exactly as fast as you needed to. You let me speak first. That is what I needed. A small breaking of something happened in his face. A small breaking that he caught and held still. I had seen him hold himself still many times. I had not seen him have to. I did not plan that, he said. I know, I did. He looked at me for a long moment. Then his voice came back low. You walked out onto the floor of my council chamber and named the dissent before he could write it. You quoted the order in his face. You left him no place to stand. The corner of my mouth moved. I have been reading the records. His shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. It was the first time in any room I had been in with him that I had seen his shoulders move out of the line he kept them in by trained habit. They dropped. They did not come back up to where they had been. I am going to go to my room now, I told him. My hands have not stopped shaking, and I would prefer to do that part somewhere private. He nodded. I walked past him. At the turn of the corridor, I stopped. I did not turn around. I said one more thing over my shoulder, and I do not know why I said it because it was not strategic and it was not careful, and I am not in the habit of saying things to him that are neither strategic nor careful. I said, You did not need to come find me in the corridor. You could have sent word. You did not have to be the person who came looking. I want you to know that I noticed. I did not wait for him to answer. I went to my room. I closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time with my hands folded in my lap to make them be still. They were not still. The shaking was small, but it would not stop. It was the first time in this court that I had been visible to it in the way I had walked into it determined never to be. It was also the first time I had wanted to be. That was the thing that frightened me. That was the thing I lay in the dark thinking about for the rest of the afternoon, while the snow that had been thinking about starting finally started, and the light at the window went gray, and the council chamber on the other side of the court returned to whatever it returned to after a foreign-born consort had stood on the floor of it and read a senior counselor a piece of his own family history in front of his colleagues. I had been seen. By all of them. I did not yet know what that was going to cost. The poisoned cup. I took the bottle out of my pocket. I looked at it for a long time. Then I opened the window and poured it out into the gray winter air of the North Country, 3 floors above a garden that was bare and dormant and would be alive again in spring. I put the empty bottle in my healer's bag. I sat down on the edge of the washroom sink with both hands on the porcelain rim, and I breathed. I did not cry yet. I would cry later, in my own room, alone, with the door locked, for the first time in as long as I could remember. I cried because of what I had nearly done. I cried because of who I had nearly become, in a room full of grief that had not been enough to stop me, until a girl with gray eyes had asked me with complete openness if I was the kind of person who told the truth. I cried because the answer was yes. It had always been yes, and I had almost let it become no. I sat in the washroom for a very long time before I could stand up. Then I stood up. I washed my hands. I went back to my rounds. I did not tell anyone what I had done and what I had not done in the East Wing corridor on a Thursday. Some things you carry alone because you are the only one who can carry them correctly, and because some debts are paid privately in the daily work of becoming something better than the worst you were capable of. I became better after that Thursday, slowly, unevenly, in the way of someone learning a new habit in the body of an old one. But I became better. I am telling you this because I need you to know it happened, even though no one else knew it happened, even though it cost her nothing because she never knew the cup was clean. Some things count even when no one sees them count. This was one of those things. What the stone remembered. Rowan. I took her to the room on a morning when the first hard frost had whitened the courtyard. Not because I had decided to. Not because I had worked out the order of revelations and determined the correct number of weeks before the first one. Because she had found the room again the day before. This time I found her there. Her hand was flat on the stone beside the sealed door. Her eyes were closed. Her face was doing something I had no name for, and her breathing had changed in a way that told me whatever she was hearing in the stone was louder today than it had been before. She was waking up. The dormant abilities of the Ash Bloodline do not announce themselves. They unfold the way winter unfolds into spring, not with a single decisive day, but with accumulated evidence that something is becoming that was not before. I stood in the corridor behind her, watching her hear the room through 4 inches of sealed stone, and I thought, I have been waiting for this. I have been managing the timeline of this. I have been calculating when to tell her, what to tell her first, how to frame it so that the fear is manageable and the truth is receivable. And I thought, I have been managing this the way I manage everything, from a safe distance, from behind the control, from inside the careful calculation of a man who has learned that the distance is necessary for the work to get done. And I thought, she is standing in front of that door hearing it without training, without preparation, without anyone having told her what she is, and she is not running, she is not afraid, she is listening. I spoke her name once, low. She turned. She was not startled. She had known I was there for some time. She had been choosing not to move away from the door. Her voice was barely above breath. Today it is louder. I know. You can hear it too. Not the way you can, but yes. She looked at me. The gray of her eyes had gone the deeper gray it went when she was working something out underneath the surface, and she was not interested in covering it. Are you going to keep telling me you will explain when you can explain it fully? No. I reached past her. Not past her in a way that crowded, in a way that had enough distance to make clear the reaching was for the stone, not for her. There is a specific place in the stone beside the door, a place that has been keyed to the Ash Bloodline for 200 years. I pressed my palm against it the way the old records had described, the way I had learned from those records 11 years ago, the way I had been waiting for someone to press it beside me ever since. The door opened. She did not go in immediately. She looked at the room from the doorway. It was not large, not a grand revelation, just a room. Stone walls, a long table, oil lamps that I lit with the striker from the table's edge. On the table, books. Old ones, older than the court itself, some of them. The kind of old where you handle the covers with the flat of your hand, not your fingertips. She stepped into the room. She went to the table. She looked at the books, and then at me. The understanding had already arrived in her face by the time she spoke. These are Ash records. Yes, the ones that stop mid-sentence in the histories. The histories do not stop. They were moved. These are what was moved. She touched the nearest cover, the flat of her hand, careful and instinctive, as if she knew already how old things needed to be handled. Why were they moved? Because 200 years ago, the ruling council at the time determined that the Ash Bloodline represented a political complication they did not know how to manage. What kind of complication? I pulled out the chair. She sat. I sat across from her. The old records, I told her, going back 500 years, document something the consolidation councils wanted to make unremarkable and ultimately undocumentable. There are abilities tied to the old bloodlines. The Ash line specifically produced women who could feel the land the way territorial wolves feel it. Not the same way, but analogous. They could read rooms, read people, read the truth of a place without being told it. They could feel the old wards, the old workings, the things the first wolf packs built into the borders of this territory before language came along and tried to explain things that were not the kind of things language does well with. The ability is dormant in women of the bloodline, until something activates it. She held my gaze. Until what? until they are in the territory long enough for the territory to recognize them. How long? It varies. The records indicate between 3 weeks and 3 months. I have been here long enough. Yes. And you knew this before I arrived. Yes? You did not tell me. No. Why? I held her gaze. The hardest part was already in her question. The answer was just the shape of carrying it across the table to her. Because the last woman of your bloodline who was brought to this court, 200 years ago, was brought by a council who understood what she was and wanted to use it. And when they had used it, they sealed the room and stopped recording the family. And the woman did not leave this court, as she had entered it. Silence. The oil lamps burned. The room was warm for a room with no windows. I watched her absorb it. She did not flinch. She did not soften her face into the careful nothing she used in council. She simply held it, the way a person holds something heavy, until they know whether they are going to set it down or carry it. And is it a different kind of court? I am trying to make it be. She looked at me for a long time. Her hand was still on the cover of the nearest book. You married me to bring me here. I married you to bring you here, and to make sure that the bringing was done with terms that gave you something in return. And that gave you the ability to leave, if you wanted to leave. The next sentence fell into the room like a small stone into still water. The debt, the grain, Marin. Yes. She was looking down at the book now. Her thumb had come to rest at the seam of the binding. You could have simply had me brought here, the way the council brought the last woman. You are the Alpha King. You have the power for that. I know. Why didn't you? I looked at her. The lamplight caught the line of her cheekbone, the shadow of her lashes, the small, precise stillness she went into when she was waiting to be told the truth. Because the 3-second look on the steps happened before I even saw your face. I felt you cross the border 3 hours before you arrived. My wolf recognized your bloodline, and I thought, whatever this woman is, whatever the prophecy makes of her, whatever the council needs, she is going to be treated like a person who walked into this court with her eyes open and her own reasons and her own will. She is not going to be brought here. She is going to choose to come. She was very still. The prophecy. One woman will save the kingdom. One woman will destroy it. And you do not know which I am. I have never believed you are the one who destroys. You cannot know that. No, I cannot know that. The silence after that one was different from the silences before it. It was a silence that had a decision sitting inside it, and we both watched the decision form without rushing it. She looked at the books on the table, the sealed records, the 200 years of her family someone had decided was better hidden than known. She looked at the books on the table, the sealed records, the 200 years of her family someone had decided was better hidden than known. She put her hand on the nearest book again, the flat of her hand, careful, and her voice came out smaller than she usually let it be. I want to read them. They are yours. They have always been yours. I have just been keeping them safe until you could come for them. She held my eyes for a long moment that was not 3 seconds. It was the kind of moment that does not have a number. Then she looked back at the books and began to read. I sat across from her and I let her read, and the room was warm, and the oil lamps burned, and outside the sealed walls the north country wind moved through the pines the way it had moved through them for 500 years while the land waited for someone of this bloodline to come back and hear what it was saying. She read for an hour without speaking. Then her hand stopped on a page. Her eyes came up to mine. The color in her face had gone. Rowan. She turned the book toward me. The page was a record of what had been done to the last woman of her line. I watched her read what those men had written about my predecessor's signing hand on the order. I watched her read the names of the council members who had voted for it. I watched her read the date. When she looked up again, the question in her face was different from the question she had asked at the table. Is anyone alive who voted for this? The grandsons of 3 of them sit on my council. She closed the book very carefully. Her hand on the cover was not steady. Take me back to my rooms. I did. We did not speak in the corridor. At her door she stopped and turned, and the gray of her eyes was so cold I felt it in my chest before I felt it in the air between us. I need to be alone tonight, Lyra, please. It was the first time she had said please to me. I have replayed it every night since. I went back to my study. I did not sleep. At 3 a.m, I stood outside her door for a long time the way I had stood outside it during the storm. This time she did not say thank you through the wood. This time the silence on the other side of the door was the silence of a woman who had read what had happened to a woman with her face 200 years ago, alone in a stone room in the same wing she was sleeping in now, and was deciding what to do about the fact that she had married a man whose ancestors had signed the order. I went back to my study before dawn. I did not knock. The lie beneath his silence. Lyra. I did not come out of my room for 2 nights. Not because I was hiding. Because I was reading. He had given me the records, all of them. He had not stopped me when I asked one of the morning girls to bring books from the locked room down to the east wing. He had not asked what I was looking for. He had simply made the room available to me and gone silent at the edges of my life, visible if I needed him, absent if I did not. And I read. I read through the 2nd night, and at the bottom of the 7th ledger I found the page I had not been looking for. It was not in the records of the woman who had died. It was in the margin of a separate document, in a different hand, written 10 years later, by the grandson of one of the men who had signed the order. He had been an apprentice in the archives. He had found the records. He had written what he found on the inside cover of an unrelated history. He had written, "The translation is wrong. The original does not say 1 woman, it says 1 lineage. And it does not say save or destroy, it says weave or unravel. These are not the same things." He had written it in the kind of small, precise hand that knows it is writing something dangerous and is doing it anyway. He had been 22 years old. He had died of a fever the following winter. The note had been sitting in the inside cover of a book about northern weather patterns for 200 years. I read it 3 times to be sure. Then I picked up the book and I carried it across the corridors of the court to Rowan's study at 4 a.m, and I knocked once and went in without waiting. He was at his desk. He had not slept. The lamp at his elbow had burned almost down. He looked up at me with a face I had never seen on him before, open in a way that had no defense in it, exhausted, watchful, and he stood up so fast the chair scraped on the stone. I put the book on his desk. I pointed to the margin. I watched him read. I watched the page do to him what it had done to me. When he looked up, his voice came out rough. Not from anger, from 40 hours of not sleeping and the specific kind of fear a man feels when he has just been handed evidence that he has been wrong about something at the foundation of his reign. How long has that note been there? 200 years, at least. No one told me, no one looked. He sat down. He did not sit down the way he usually sat down. He sat down the way a man sits down when his legs have decided for him that he is going to. His voice came back, careful and quiet. If it is 1 lineage, not 2 women, then the prophecy is not about you and Seraphine. He said the name the way you say a name when you say it often in your head, and saying it out loud sounds different from the inside version. I felt something in my ribs do something, and I made my face do nothing. Who is Seraphine? He went still. That water-going still stillness Celine had described once in a different conversation that I had not understood until I saw it now. She is my mate. The room did something strange. The walls did not move, and the lamp did not move, and the cold air at the window did not move, but something between us moved. the way a stage moves when the lights change without anyone telling you they are about to. You did not tell me you had a mate. She is missing. She has been missing for 2 years. Missing how? She left. I do not know why. I have not been able to find her. I stood in his study at 4 a.m. with the 200-year-old book between us, and I thought about a man who had married me to bring me here, who had stood outside my door in a storm, who had nearly touched my hand in a firelit library, and I thought about a mate, missing for 2 years, that he had not mentioned to me. Not once. I had to put my hand on the desk to stay where I was. I did it without thinking. He saw me do it. His eyes went to my hand and stayed there, and his face did the thing it did when he was deciding how much of something to admit out loud. Are you still looking for her? Yes. Do you love her? The pause was long enough. I did. And now, I am no longer certain what I am now. I looked at him. He looked at me. The study was very quiet, the way rooms are very quiet when both people in them know that the next words will matter, and neither of them has decided yet which words to use. I had a question I wanted to ask. It had 3 syllables, and it was not who is Seraphine, and it was not do you love her. It was am I real to you? And I did not ask it because asking it would have given him the chance to answer it the wrong way, and I did not yet know what I would do if he answered it the wrong way. So I asked the other thing instead, the practical thing, the thing my body would let me ask. I need to think. I know. I am going to the library. I know. I walked to the door. At the door I stopped. The note in the margin was still in my mouth, the part I had not told him yet, and I knew if I left without telling him it would sit between us for a long time, and I did not have a long time. I did not have anything but the next 4 minutes before whatever this had been collapsed into something it could not come back from. The prophecy translation is wrong. Someone translated it to mean 2 women in competition when the original says 1 lineage working together. I think someone 200 years ago was very afraid of what that meant and changed the translation so that the people at this court would see threat where the original saw something else. What did the original see? I do not know yet, but I think it was not threat. I think it was possibility. I left. I did not look at him as I left, because if I had looked at him, I would have stayed, and I needed to not stay. I went to the library. I did not go to the window seat. I went to the section where the old territories' maps were kept, and I stood at the table and laid out 6 maps in sequence from oldest to newest. I looked at the way the borders had changed, and I started looking for the pattern that the Ash Bloodline was supposed to feel. I let myself feel it, and I felt it. Not dramatically. The same as hearing the room through 4 inches of stone, a frequency below language. An impression of connection. The way one map spoke to the next, the way the oldest borders still existed underneath the new ones, like a river remembering the course it ran before someone changed the banks. I felt it for 2 hours. I mapped what I felt in my worn leather notebook in a way I could not have explained to anyone using words that existed in ordinary language. At the end of 2 hours, I understood something I did not know how to say yet. Something about what the land was and what it needed, and what my presence in it meant. Not threat, not danger, but something older and quieter than either of those. Then I picked up the notebook and I walked back to his study. He had not moved. The lamp had burned out. The gray of pre-dawn was at the windows. He was sitting exactly where I had left him, the book about northern weather patterns still open on his desk to the margin note, his hand flat on the page beside the writing of a man who had died at 23. I put my notebook on the desk, open to the page where I had mapped what I had felt. He looked at it. He looked at me. There was a question on his face that he did not ask, and I did not answer the question he did not ask, and I started talking before either of us could decide to say something we could not take back. I told him what the land felt like from inside the ability he had recognized when he felt me cross the border. I told him what the old wards felt like. I told him what the new borders were covering. I told him what was underneath them, that it was not a threat, it was a structure, the oldest structure in the territory, built by the first wolf packs before politics, before consolidation, before anyone decided that certain families were better kept in sealed rooms. He listened the way he listened, completely, without filling the spaces. When I finished, his voice came back the way it came back when he had been working something out underneath a long silence. The Eastern delegation has been refusing the alliance because they can feel the old structure has been disrupted. They cannot name it. None of them have the ability to name it. But they feel it the way territorial wolves feel wrongness at the border. They feel something unfinished in the treaty, something missing. That is not about water rights or border markers. The old wards of the territory include the eastern borders. The consolidation wars separated the eastern packs from the northern ones and disrupted the ward structure the first packs built. If the structure could be restored, the eastern delegation would feel it. They would not know why they felt differently, but they would feel it. Can you do that? I looked at him. I do not know. I have not done anything like this before. I have never been trained. I am working from feeling, from records, from what I can hear in the stone. I need your help to try. I cannot do it from inside the room with no handle. I need to be at the actual eastern border, in the territory, at the place where the old ward lines originally connected. I need you with me, because I cannot navigate the territory alone, and because I think the ability works differently when the alpha of the territory is present. I think it is meant to work together, not separately. He looked at me. His face did something, the way faces do when a person has just been handed the thing they had not allowed themselves to hope for, and is testing whether they are allowed to hold it. The prophecy, one lineage working together, that is what I think it means. Not one woman who saves and one who destroys. One lineage and the alpha they work with, weaving the thing that has been unraveling since the consolidation. He was quiet for a very long time. When? Tomorrow morning. If we leave at dawn, we can reach the eastern border marker before midday. I will arrange the escort. Not a large escort, 2 guards at the perimeter. We need to be close to the border without the noise of a delegation. All right. I turned to go. Lyra. I turned. He used my name rarely. He used it precisely, with the same attention he used for everything, with the same quality of meaning exactly what he said. Thank you for not leaving, after what I told you about Seraphine. I looked at him in the study, in the lamplight that was no longer lamplight because the lamp had burned out and the dawn had come up while we worked, at the desk he had been sitting at since before I came in a room that had his presence in every wall of it the way rooms do when someone has worked in them for a very long time. I have not decided what I think yet. About any of it, I am still thinking. I know. I will tell you when I know. I know. I left. That was the night the prophecy reframed itself. Before the kiss, Lyra. We left at dawn the next morning. The eastern border was 11 miles. The road through the pine forest in the early winter morning was the kind of road that does not make you speak, not because it is uncomfortable, but because it has its own quality of presence. The pines tall enough to change the light, the frost on the ground. The specific silence of a cold forest that is alive underneath but very still above. We rode mostly without speaking. He was ahead of me at first, the way alphas ride when they are in the lead, then beside me when the road widened, the 2 guards a careful distance behind. I could feel the border before I could see it. The ability that had been unfolding for weeks was fully present by now. Not dramatic, just present. The way your own heartbeat is present once you have learned to feel it, it is always there. The old ward line was a low feeling in the ground, a frequency I could identify by now from my hours in the locked room reading the old records, feeling along the stone walls, learning the shape of what the territory carried in its oldest self. At the border marker, I dismounted. He dismounted beside me. The guards held back. We had arranged this on the road. I needed quiet. I needed my hands on the ground. I needed the specific quality of concentration that is not possible when several people are watching from 4 feet away. I knelt beside the border marker. It was old stone, older than the court, the oldest thing in the territory. I had read about border markers in the sealed records. I knew what I was looking at. I knew what I was touching when I put both hands flat on the stone. The ward line was broken here. I could feel the break the way you feel a crack in something that should be whole. Not dramatic, just wrong. The specific quality of wrongness that means something has been incomplete for a very long time, and the incompleteness has become familiar so that it takes someone new to feel it clearly. He crouched beside me. His hands did not go to the stone. He put them beside mine, not on mine, beside, the same way the chair arm had been, the same small space that was not very much space but was not nothing. His voice came low, and I felt it in my ribs before I heard it. What do you feel? The break is here. The old ward line ended here, and the western branch went south, and the eastern branch went northeast. The consolidation wars cut the northeast branch. The eastern packs lost the connection to the northern ward structure 70 years before the first alliance attempt. Can you feel the path it should take? I am trying. I felt along the stone. I felt along the ground under my hands. I felt the way the frequency moved toward the south and then the break, the severed place where the northeast branch had been cut. I need you to put your hand here. He moved his hand to the stone beside mine, close enough that the warmth of it was at the edge of my awareness, close enough that I could feel the difference between the stone under my hands and the stone under his. The stone went hot. That is the simplest way to say it. The stone went hot. That is the simplest way to say it. The stone we were both touching went hot. Not warm, hot, the way a kettle handle goes hot when somebody has left the kettle on the fire too long and you have grabbed it without thinking. I did not pull my hands off. I think now that I should have. I think now that someone with training would have. I did not have training. I had the records and the feeling underneath my ribs, and the feeling was telling me to stay, so I stayed. The hot in the stone moved up through my hands into my forearms, and from my forearms into my chest, and from my chest into the back of my throat. Not pain. Pressure. The pressure of something that had been folded for a very long time, deciding it was going to unfold whether the body holding it was ready or not. My breath went short. I did not say anything. I could not get the air for a sentence. Rowan's head turned toward me. I saw his face in my peripheral vision, going from the open, careful expression he had been wearing to something else, something sharper, alert. Rowan's hand was still on the stone beside mine. His head turned toward me. I saw his face in my peripheral vision, going from the open, careful expression he had been wearing to something else, something sharper, alert. The face of a man whose wolf had just felt something the man had not yet felt. His voice came low and quick. Lyra. I could not answer. The pressure in my chest moved into my head. I felt the small hot trickle at my upper lip before I knew what it was. I lifted one hand off the stone, just one, to touch my mouth, and my fingers came away wet and red. And I looked at the red on my fingers, and the red did not look like mine. The way blood never looks like yours when it is the first thing your body has decided to do without asking you first. My knees did the thing my legs had done in the village square the morning the riders came. Not a collapse, a giving, the slow understanding that the body had decided the standing part of the conversation was over. I went sideways. He caught me before I went down to the frost. His arms came under me, one across my back, one under my knees. The way they had come under the girl on the road in some other story I had never been the woman in. I had thought he caught the way men catch. He did not. He caught the way a wall catches. There was no negotiation in it. There was no part of his body that was deciding whether to be there. He was already there. The deciding had been done somewhere underneath, in the part of him that had been pressing against his ribs since the night I crossed the border, and I could feel that part of him for the first time, very clearly, holding me up against the cold. The stone behind us was still hot. My hand was still on it. I had not let go. The other hand, the one I had lifted to my face, was now flat against his chest, leaving red on the dark wool of his coat. He looked down at the blood on his coat, then at the blood under my nose. Then his eyes came up to mine. I had never seen the silver of his eyes do what they did at that moment. I do not have words for it. I will not pretend I have words for it. The closest I can come is, they went from controlled to uncontrolled in the space of one breath, and what they uncontrolled into was something the silver had been keeping covered my whole life with him. His voice came out rough. "Take your hand off the stone." I shook my head, the smallest shake. "It is not finished. Lyra, it is not finished. It is recognizing. If I take my hand off, it stops recognizing. Hold me up." He held me up. I do not know how long. Time stopped working the way time normally works. The frost stopped working. The pine forest stopped working. The 2 guards we had left at the perimeter were not in the world I was in. The world I was in was the stone under my one hand and his arms under my back and his coat under my other hand, and the slow opening of something inside the territory that had been folded since before any of us had been born. The pressure in my chest went up another notch. It crested. And then the stone went cold, not slowly all at once, the way a fever breaks. The hot under my hand dropped away, and underneath the hot there was a quiet, a very deep quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when something that has been making a sound for 200 years has finished making the sound, and is, for the first time, simply listening back. I let my hand fall off the stone. I let my head fall against his shoulder. The blood at my upper lip was still warm. It was the only warm thing on my body. He did not move me. He did not lift me. He held me where I was, my back against his arm, my forehead against the line of his jaw, and I could feel his breathing against the top of my head, uneven, the way it had been when he found me in the locked wing corridor. He did not have his composure. He was sitting in the frost at the foot of the oldest border stone in the North Country with my blood on his coat and his face in my hair, and he did not have his composure, and he did not bother to find it. After a while, my voice came back. Something happened. His arm tightened against my back. "Yes, I do not know if it is enough." His voice came against my hair. "Something is different. I can feel it. My wolf can feel it. The ward line is not repaired, but it moved." I lifted my head off his shoulder. My head felt heavy in the way a head feels heavy after a fever. He did not let go of me. He shifted to support more of my weight as I lifted, the way a person shifts when they have decided the holding is the part they are doing now. I think it recognized that someone was there who was supposed to be there. I think that is what it needed, not repair, recognition. How do you know that what it needed was you specifically? I looked at him. He was looking at me. The open face, the quiet one. The one the court did not usually get. The blood from my nose had stopped, but my upper lip was still wet, and my hand on his coat had left a small red shape that he had not yet noticed and would notice later and would not have washed out for 2 weeks. Because you felt it too, when our hands were on the stone together. You felt the difference. Yes. The prophecy does not mean one woman working alone. It means one lineage working with the alpha of the territory they are in. The Ash Bloodline could only do this in this territory with the alpha of this territory. It is not about me saving the kingdom. It is about what we do together that cannot be done separately. He held my eyes. What we do together. His voice had dropped. I felt it on my skin before I heard it. The frost on the ground, the pine forest, the old border stone between us, the guards far enough away to be sound rather than presence. Lyra. He said my name the precise way he said it. The way he used it rarely. With attention. Yes. He reached over slowly, the same slowness he had always used, the slowness of a man who has never wanted to be one of the things that frightened her. His hand came to the side of my face, his thumb just below my cheekbone. Not a touch that asked for anything, a touch that simply arrived and stayed, steady, the way he was steady in every room I had ever been in with him. I had been touched in ways that took something. I had been touched in ways that were about the hand doing the touching and not the person being touched. This was not that. This was a hand that was simply and entirely about me. I leaned into it, the same way I had leaned into the wardstone when I was trying to hear it correctly. Instinctively. Before thought arrived to second-guess the instinct, he made a sound, very small. The sound a person makes when something they have been holding for a long time, with both hands, is received. He leaned toward me, I leaned toward him, and he kissed me. The way the library evening had almost been, the way the storm corridor had almost been, the way every almost had been building towards since the night on the steps when I caught the 3 seconds and filed them. He kissed me the way careful things arrive, not with force, not with urgency, with the specific quality of something that has been given enough time to know exactly what it is. It was not a short kiss. It was not a long kiss. It was the right length for a kiss that had been a long autumn in the making, in a frost-edged pine forest at the oldest border stone in the North Country, with a ward line that had just moved for the first time in living memory. When we moved apart, we did not move far apart. His forehead came to rest against mine, the same way the storm had settled into ordinary rain after the worst of it passed. Not over, just quiet. His voice came against my forehead very low. I have been trying to figure out, since the night on the steps, whether what I was feeling was the recognition of your bloodline, or something else. And it is something else. The bloodline recognition happened before I saw your face. What I felt when I saw your face was something else. I pulled back just enough to see him. He was looking at me with the honest face, the one without performance, the one the court did not usually get. I should have told you about Seraphine before we left the court this morning. Yes? I am telling you now. The hoofbeats came down the road behind us. He went still against me. Not the controlled stillness, the other one. The one that arrives when something has just changed and a man's wolf has known it before his mind has. I turned my head. The guard rode hard. He pulled up at the edge of the clearing, breath fogging in the cold, and he did not dismount, because he did not have time to. Your Majesty, his voice cracked once on the word. She is at the gates. Rowan went very still, the frost on the ground, the pine forest still and cold. The old border stone beside us, the warmth of a kiss still in the air between us, beginning to understand what was about to happen to it. Rowan's hand was still at my face. It did not move. His eyes did not leave mine. Who is at the gates? The guard looked between us. He was 20 years old. He had been riding hard. He did not have the politics yet to know how to deliver this. Lady Seraphine, Your Majesty, she came back this morning. I felt the cold in the ground come up through my knees and into my chest, and I made my face do nothing. Rowan did not move. His thumb was still under my cheekbone. Then his hand fell away. Not fast, not dramatic. It fell away the way a man's hand falls away when the thing it was holding has just been taken out of the room. He stood up. He stood up the way alphas stand when they have to be alphas in the next 60 seconds. The transition went through him like a wall coming down behind his eyes. I stood up too. My knees were not steady. I made them steady. I did not look at him. If I had looked at him, I would not have managed the next sentence. And the next sentence had to be managed. Because he was not the only person in this clearing who was going to need to be a different person in 60 seconds. And I had married him with my eyes open. And I was not going to be the reason this came apart before any of us understood what it was. We need to find out what she knows before we decide anything else. Lyra, I mean it. Not because I am ashamed of what just happened. Not because I wish it had not happened. Because I walked into your court with my eyes open and my own will intact, and I am not going to be the reason that something complicated becomes catastrophic before anyone understands what it is. He looked at me for a long time. You are remarkable. I am practical. Those are not mutually exclusive. I walked back to the horses. I did not let him help me mount. I rode back toward the court in the cold pine morning with the ward line moved behind us and the frost on the ground and a kiss in my mouth that had not yet finished arriving when it had to be set down. I did not cry on the ride back. I rode the 11 miles back to the gates with my face arranged in the particular composure that I had been making since I was 9 years old in a kitchen in a village that did not feed me on the days my father was angry. It is a face I am very good at. It is a face nobody at this court had seen yet because I had not needed it here. I had not needed it because nobody at this court had hurt me yet. I went through the gates without looking at him. I went past the stable boys without looking at them. I went past Kaelin in the corridor of the main hall, who tried to say something to me that had a question in it, and I gave him the small polite nod that I gave the village priest when I was 12 and walked past. Because if I had stopped to answer the question, my face would have done a thing on the stone floor of the main hall that I was not going to do on the stone floor of the main hall. I went to my room. I closed the door. I locked it. I leaned my back against the door because my legs were doing the giving thing again, and I did not want to fall on the carpet without a wall behind me to find with my hand on the way down. I slid down the door. I sat with my back to the wood, and my knees pulled up, and I put my forearms on my knees, and my forehead on my forearms, and the composure I had carried home through 11 miles and 1 corridor went out of me all at once. I cried. I cried the way I had not cried since the night my mother died. I cried the way you cry when the body has been carrying something for a long time, and the body has finally been put in a room where nobody is watching, and the body has decided it is going to put the thing down whether the mind has given permission or not. I cried about the kiss. I cried about the hand at my face. I cried about the moment the hand fell away, the way it fell away, the way a man's hand falls away when the thing it was holding has just been taken out of the room. I cried about her name. I had not known her name 3 hours before. I knew it now. I would know it for the rest of my life. Seraphine. I would know the shape of those 4 syllables on his mouth, the way he had said it at 4 in the morning in his study, the careful way he had said it, the way you say a name when you have been saying it inside your head every day for 2 years and saying it out loud is a different shape from the inside one. I cried because I had been an arrangement. I had walked into this knowing I had been an arrangement. I had walked in with my eyes open, with my own will, with my notebook and my knife and my dried herb bundle. I had told myself I was here to do a job that was useful to my sister and useful to my village and useful to the woman I was going to find out who I was when nobody was looking at me. I had been doing well at it. I had been doing well at it until a man with a hand under my back and a thumb under my cheekbone had kissed me at a border stone in a frost, and the part of me that I had not allowed to want anything in 22 years had said, very small, very clear, oh. Oh, so this is what it would be. Oh, so this is what it would be. And then the hoofbeats had come down the road. I cried because I had let myself believe, for the 4 seconds between when his hand came to my face and when the guard came over the rise, that the kiss was the beginning of a life. I cried because believing it had cost me something I did not yet know how to count. I had only known him long enough to learn his step in a corridor. I had not known him long enough to be allowed to grieve him. I was grieving him anyway. The grieving was the part of my body that had decided to stop asking permission. I cried because somewhere in the last weeks I had stopped being a girl who walked into a stranger's court because her sister needed grain, and I had become a woman who could feel a ward line move under her hands, and the woman could feel things the girl had been protected from feeling, and the woman did not yet have the calluses the girl had spent 22 years building. I cried for the girl. The girl had been good at not being hurt by men. The woman did not know how yet. I sat against the door for a long time. The light at the window went gray, then dark. The fire in the small grate burned down without my tending it. I did not light a candle. I sat in the dark of the room I no longer knew if I belonged in, with the dried herb bundle from my village on the windowsill, and I let the body finish the part it had started. When I finally stood up, my legs were unsteady, and my eyes were swollen, and my hands had stopped shaking, and that last part was the thing I had been waiting for. The crying had not been for relief. The crying had been to put something down so the hands could go back to working. The crying had not been for relief. The crying had been to put something down so the hands could go back to working. I went to the basin. I washed my face. The water was cold the way it was always cold this far north. I held the cold cloth against my eyes for a long time. I looked at myself in the small mirror over the basin. The face I saw was not the face that had ridden out at dawn. It was older by something I did not have the count for. The gray of my eyes was the gray it went when I was working something out underneath the surface, and I was not interested in covering it. A woman has come back to this court. She has been gone for 2 years. She has reasons I do not yet know. He has not yet told me what she is to him now. I do not yet know what I am to him now. I do not yet know what I want to be. I am going to find out. I am going to find out from her before I find out from him. That was the decision I made at the basin and the small mirror in the room I no longer knew if I belonged in. And it was the first decision I had made in this court that I had made entirely without him. It was the decision that saved me. I did not know that yet. I would know it later. I went to bed. I slept hard, the way a body sleeps when it has finished doing the thing it had been holding off doing for too long. I did not dream. In the morning, the snow that had been thinking about starting all autumn finally started. It came down through the night and into the morning, and it kept coming. I stood at the window in the soft gray light and watched it cover the courtyard, and I thought about the woman who had arrived in the late afternoon of the day before, and I thought about what she might look like when I saw her in the corridor, and I thought about what I was going to say to her. She did not come to the library that morning. She did not come the second morning either. I waited. I had learned in this court how to wait. The woman who came back. Lyra. I had been at the library window when she came through the gates. I had heard them open from 2 corridors away. The heavy iron sound the front gates made that I had learned to recognize over the autumn. And I had stood at the library window before I had decided to stand at the library window, and I had watched her dismount in the courtyard while the snow that had been thinking about coming all afternoon thought about coming a little harder. She was not what I expected. I had built a version of her in the days before, the way you build the version of an unknown thing from the outline of it you can see from a distance. I had built her as a rival, as a danger, as the woman the prophecy might mean when it said the one who destroys. She was none of those things from the window. She was a woman who arrived at the gate of a place she had left with the specific posture of someone returning to a conversation they interrupted 2 years ago, and have thought about every day since. She was tall. She moved with the ease of someone who had been through something significant and had not folded inside it. She had the bearing of a woman who had made decisions she was still standing in, the way you stand in a decision when it was very large and cost you very much, and you made it anyway. She did not look up at the library window. I stepped back from the glass. I sat in the library for a long time with my worn notebook and my notes on the ward line and the feeling in my chest that was not jealousy. It was something more complicated than jealousy. Something that had respect and dread and the specific grief of understanding that a story you thought you were in may have a different shape than you had begun to assume. Rowan. She came to my study an hour after her arrival. I had been expecting the hour. I had been preparing for it the way I prepare for difficult conversations. By clearing my desk, opening the window, standing in the cold air for a few minutes until I felt like myself rather than like someone performing himself. She knocked. She had always knocked, even when she did not have to. "Come in." She came in. She was thinner than when she left. She had been in the East. I knew this from the 2 messages she had sent in 2 years. Both brief, both careful, both telling me she was alive and nothing else. She stood inside the door. She had not sat down. She was not the sitting down kind in conversations. She never had been. "I owe you an explanation. You do not owe me anything. I would like one. Those are different things." Things, I said, that were too precise. It had been a thing between us in the years before she left. A small private recognition of the way I talked when I was being honest. I heard the prophecy 2.5 years ago. Not from you. From the second seer. The one who came from the East. The one you did not tell me about. I said nothing. I went to her directly after she left your court. I asked her what she had told you. She kept her eyes on me as she spoke. The version she told you was the version the council asked her to translate into language the court would understand. It is not what she saw. What did she see? She saw 2 women and a man and a land, and the thing that had to happen before the land could be whole again. It was not a competition. It was not a danger. It was a working, something that required all 3 of us in the right place at the right time. She said she did not know how to say that to a king's court, in language that would not be misused, so she simplified it. And you left because of that. I left because when I heard what the seer had actually seen, I understood something I had been trying not to understand for a long time. She looked at me. There was no hardness in her face. There was only the clarity of a woman who had already done the hard work, somewhere else, of being honest with herself. You were never meant to be mine. I was meant to be the bridge. I was meant to be the one who recognized the bloodline, who came back from the East when the time was right with the information that would help you understand what was happening and what was needed. She paused. The next line came carefully, but it came. The woman who woke the ward. I could feel it from 3 territories away. She did it yesterday morning with someone who resonates as alpha of the land. She did it at the eastern border marker. A beat. That was you with her. Yes. She looked at me. I have known her for 10 years. I had never seen her face do quite what it did in that moment. Something that looked like grief and relief existing in the same expression, neither of them winning. I have been 2 years in the East, learning the rest of what the seer saw, learning the old languages, learning the traditions that the consolidation wars tried to end. I have letters for her, from the Eastern tradition healers who have been keeping the records that this court's locked room does not have. She will want to read them. I know. A silence, the kind that has a question in it. Are you angry with me for leaving without telling you? I was. I am not anymore. Are you what I think you are? With her. I held her gaze. I do not know yet what it is. Yes, you do. A pause. She is the one the land chose. You are the alpha of the land. The land has been choosing both of you for a very long time. I was the part that had to happen in between. I was the part that was supposed to recognize it and step back so the thing that was meant could be. She did not look away when she said the next part. She was being deliberate. I am telling you this so that you understand that my leaving was not a failure of what we were. It was the completion of my part in something larger than what I understood when I arrived at this court and bonded to you. I bonded to you because I was meant to, because something in the territory needed me to be here long enough to recognize what was coming, and to go and learn what she would need to know when she arrived. I stood at the window of my study, in the cold air, looking at a woman I had shared 10 years of this court with, who had left 2 years ago to do something I had not understood, and had come back to give me the understanding at the moment it was needed. I am still your healer, if you want me. I am still someone who loves this court and the people in it. I am not your mate in the old sense anymore. I have not been for 2 years, I think we both know that. But I am here if you need me. And she will need someone who has been in the East, who knows the old traditions, who can help her understand what she is doing and how to do it safely. She will be grateful for that. She will be suspicious of me first. Yes, I will earn it. She turned to leave. She stopped. The thing you felt at the border stone with her yesterday morning, I felt that in the East from 3 territories away. That is not a small thing. That is the land recognizing what it has been waiting for. That is not something that happens because of obligation or arrangement or political necessity. That is the land recognizing love. She left. I stood at the window in the cold air of the study for a very long time. Then I did something I had not done in 11 years. I went down to the kennels. I did not sit with my advisors. I did not sit with my counsel. I walked into the cold yard where my wolves were kept, and I let mine come up out of me without holding him, and I stood in the snow with him until my breath hurt and his breath hurt, and the cold of the night had gone all the way down into my hands. I had managed every difficult thing in my reign for 30 years. I could not manage this. I had nearly lost her in a clearing in a frost-edged pine forest because I had not told her in time. I had watched her ride back to the court, with her face composed, and her hands steady, and the kiss still in her mouth, and I had not been allowed to say the thing I needed to say. Because she had been right, we needed to find out what Seraphine knew before any of us made another move. And being right had cost her something I could see from 40 feet behind her on the road. I stood in the snow until I could feel my hands again, and I went back inside, and I did not knock on her door. She had asked me, on the road, not to come tonight. I did not come. It was the hardest order I had given myself in 11 years. What returned with the snow? Lyra. She came to the library on the 3rd morning after her return. Not the 2nd. The 2nd I had expected her, and she had not come, and I had spent it being grateful for the day and slightly unnerved by the gratitude. That morning I was in the window seat with the records from the East Wing that Seraphine had brought back with her, letters from healers in the Eastern traditions, maps of the old ward structures, documents in the old language that I was slowly learning to read, the way I was learning everything in this court, by feel first, and then by formal understanding. She knocked at the library door. Not the way he knocked, but the way someone knocks when they are used to being in the position of asking permission to enter rather than being asked. Come in. She came in. She was even more than she had been from the library window. Not more beautiful, more present, the way some people are present in a room, the way they take up exactly the space they occupy, without apology and without performance. I am Seraphine. I know. She did not flinch at the flatness of it. She had probably expected worse. He has not told you about me well. He is not good at telling people things. He manages information. He does not share it. There is a difference. He has been managing me as information for 2 years, and managing you as information since you arrived. And I'm going to guess that you have found this frustrating. Yes. She sat down. Not in the chair across from me, but in the other window seat. The one on the other side of the window. The one I did not use because the light was not as good. She sat in it the way you sit in a place you have decided you have the right to sit in. I am not your enemy. I know that too. How? Because you came back. To give him information that was useful for his court rather than staying away and letting the damage of your absence continue. An enemy who loved him would have stayed away. Someone who loved both him and the thing he was trying to build here came back. She looked at me with a quality of attention that reminded me of the way he looked at things. The thorough quality, the specific examination of someone cataloging information not to use it, but to understand it. The ward you moved at the border stone. It moved. I do not know if moved is the right word. It recognized us. It recognized that someone of the bloodline was at the border with the Alpha. That is what the old records say should happen. Recognition. not repair, but recognition is the beginning of repair. The Eastern tradition healers have a name for what you are doing. It is not magic in the way the court understands magic. It is relational. It requires the Ash Bloodline in proximity to the alpha of the land. It requires time and presence and the specific quality of being known by the place you are in, not just visiting it. The Eastern healers believe it takes approximately 1 year of the Ash Bloodline being in residence with the alpha of the territory before the ward structures can be fully restored. 1 year of the territory recognizing both of you as belonging to it. And then the Eastern packs will feel the old connection restored. They will not know why. They will simply feel that the North can be trusted again, in the way it was trusted before the consolidation wars divided what was whole. And the prophecy. One lineage will weave the kingdom. The seers have been translating it wrong for 200 years because the original word for weave also means tend. The way you tend something alive that requires ongoing care. It is not a one-time act. It is a practice. A continuous practice of being present to what the land needs. And the Ash Bloodline does this with the alpha of the territory. It was always meant to be a working relationship, not a savior, not a destroyer. A partnership built over time, in ordinary proximity, doing ordinary things in a place that needs both of them to be whole. I sat in the window seat with the Eastern records in my hands and the winter light good on the pages, and a woman across from me who had spent 2 years in the East learning what I was going to need to know. Why did you come back yourself? Why not send the letters? Because I needed to see whether what I had gone to learn was already happening before I came back. She looked at me steadily. And it was. I did not answer. He is in love with you. I want you to know that I know that. And that it does not make me an enemy in your story. It makes me the person who had to happen first, so that he was ready for the person who was actually coming. She let it sit. I loved him. For 10 years, I love him still. In the way you love something you have been fully present to for a long time. That love does not go away. It changes shape. But what he feels for you, and what you do together in this territory, at the old ward lines, in the library, in the corridor outside your door in storms, that is a different category of thing. That is the land speaking. That is the old connection reestablishing itself through the two people it was meant to work through. She paused. I came back to tell you you are not a complication. You are not a second woman in competition with a first one. You are the thing the territory has been waiting for since the Ash Bloodline was sealed in a room with no handle 200 years ago. A pause. Welcome to the North Country. She stood up. She moved toward the door. At the door, she stopped. He is outside the library right now. He has been standing in the corridor for 11 minutes. He cannot hear what we are saying. He is simply not going very far. I looked at the library door. A small breath went out of me. Half laugh, half something else. That sounds like him. It does. She opened the door. From where I sat, I could see the corridor. I could see him, standing against the stone wall across from the library door, his hands behind his back, his step ready, his face doing the controlled thing while the rest of him did the very uncontrolled thing of standing in a corridor for 11 minutes, waiting to know if two women had found a way forward together. She said something to him quietly at the door. I did not hear what. She went down the corridor. He stood in the doorway. You have been standing there for 11 minutes. 12 by now. Come in. He came in. He did not go to the other chair. He came and sat in the window seat across from mine, the way Seraphine had sat, in the bad light, without apologizing for the choice. She told you. She told me what she came back to tell. You told me the rest, weeks ago, in pieces. I have been putting the pieces together since. What do you think of the whole? I think the land is very old and very patient, and it has been waiting for something that required a great many people to arrive in the right order and do the right things at the right time. I think I'm glad I said, "When do we leave?" He looked at me. I held his eyes. "I think you are remarkable at managing information, and I think you are learning that some things cannot be managed, and that is probably the most useful thing that has happened to you in a long time." That is an extremely precise observation. I am an extremely precise person. I know. A pause. Lyra. Yes. I want to tell you something, in my own voice, without managing it into a shape I can control. I waited. Since the night on the steps, I have not been the same person in the same way that I was before that night. I have been a king who is also a man who has been trying to be only the king for 30 years and failing, with increasing frequency, since the night you walked up his steps in a dress that was not yours, with a notebook and a knife and a dried herb bundle that smelled of where you came from. I would like to stop failing at it. I would like to be both things in the same room at the same time without the management. I do not know how to do that yet. I have not done it before. I am asking you if you will be patient while I learn. I looked at him across the window seat, in the winter light, in the East Wing library of the court that had been learning to know me through the whole length of the autumn. I am a very patient person. I know. I have conditions. Tell me. You tell me things before you manage them into shapes I cannot access. You do not replace my books without telling me you have replaced them. You let me read the records myself, rather than reading them to me in the version you have decided I can handle. Yes. And you stop standing in corridors outside my door, and come in. He was quiet for a moment. That one is harder. I know. Come in anyway. He looked at me across the window seat, across the winter light, across the long autumn between us, and the ward line that had moved, and the frost on the border stone, and the almost touches, and the book replaced in the night, and the storm. All right. I reached across the space between the window seats. I put my hand, palm up, on the sill between us. He looked at it, then he put his hand over mine, the way he had held my hand at the border stone in the frost of the eastern road, warm, steady, present. We sat in the library, in the winter light, with the eastern records and the old ward maps and the work of what was coming still ahead of us, and the work of what was already happening between us, already begun. The land outside the library window was cold and white and very old and very patient. It had been waiting a long time for exactly this. It was not waiting anymore. What the spring brought. Lyra. It is spring now. I am sitting at the long table in the council chamber, not at the end of it, not as an observer, but at the table itself. The council voted in the second month of the year to formalize the position that had been informal since the night I had put my notebook on Rowan's desk and told him what the land felt like from the inside of the ability the Ash Bloodline carries. The Eastern delegation signed the new alliance in the first true warmth of spring, not because of the water rights settlement, which had also been negotiated, not because of the border marker compromise, which had also been reached, not because of any specific term in any specific document. On the morning before the signing, the Eastern Pack Alpha, Calder, stood in the courtyard of this court in the first real warmth of the year, and his voice came out of him before he had decided whether to use it. Something has changed. Something has changed in the north. I cannot name it. I can feel it. He said it to no one in particular, the way you say a thing when the truth of it surprises you in public before you have decided whether to keep it private. I was in the courtyard. I heard him say it. It has been changing since autumn. The old ward structures of the original territory, the ones that connected the northern packs to the eastern ones before the consolidation wars, have been recognizing that the pieces are in the right places again. It is slow. It will take the rest of the year probably before the connection is fully restored. But the land can feel the direction it is going. And you can feel the land. He looked at me. Who are you? My name is Lyra. I am of the Ash Bloodline. He went still in a way I recognized, the way a man goes still when he has just been told something his blood was already telling him. We have records of your family. In the Eastern archives. Your line did not end. It was hidden. The Eastern Pax kept the records when the Northern Court sealed the room. Your people have been East all this time. I did not know that. There are more of you, not many, but more. I stood in the spring courtyard of the Northern Court in the warmth of the first good day, and I thought about a sealed room and a woman 200 years ago who refused and was made unremarkable. I thought about what hidden means when it is done with love, when people seal records not to destroy a lineage but to protect it by moving it somewhere safer than a court that wanted to use it. I thought about what hidden means when it ends. I would like to know them. I will arrange it. He signed the alliance the next day. I wrote to Marin that week. I told her about the Eastern records, about the family I had not known existed, about the ward line that had moved at the border stone in the frost in the pine forest. Marin wrote back in 5 days, faster than any letter I had received from her since she arrived at the Eastern schools. Lyra, I have been studying in the building next to the Eastern Tradition Archive for 3 months. Tell me what to look for. Marin was always the faster one at finding things. I had always been the one who held the door open while she went through. Celine, I see her every day now. She is still the healer, still the most competent person in the healing rooms. She is learning something new from the Eastern Tradition letters that Seraphine brought back. Something she has not told me the full shape of yet, but which she is working on with the specific focus of a healer who has found the next thing they need to understand. She does not look at Rowan the way she used to look at him, not because she has stopped caring about him or this court, but because she has found out what she looks like when she is looking at something that actually has room for her in it. She told me this on a morning in late winter when we were both in the East Wing corridor at the same time, and she stopped. I should tell you something. I waited. I nearly did something on a Thursday in November that I am ashamed of, that I will not do anything so close to again. I wanted you to know, not for forgiveness, because I did not do it, because I think you deserve to know that you were in danger, and the danger stopped, and it stopped because of who you are, and something you said to me in the East Wing, without knowing you were saying it. What did I say? You asked me if I was someone who told the truth. I thought about that, and are you? I am learning to be. We stood in the corridor for a moment. The Eastern records Seraphine brought have a section on the Ash Bloodline. Abilities that require 2 people rather than 1. The ability is stronger in emotional proximity. I thought you should know that, because it is your ability. And you deserve to know how it works from someone who will tell you honestly, rather than someone who will manage it. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. I am still learning. She went on down the corridor with her healer's bag at her hip, the worn leather kind that goes everywhere. Rowan. He is better at coming in. He knocked last night. He did not stand in the corridor. He knocked. I called him in. He sat in the chair by my fire, not the one that requires a certain distance, the one that does not. He told me about the Southern delegation's new terms before he had managed them into a version he could present to the council. I told him what I thought. He listened the way he listens, completely, without filling the spaces. Then his voice came back, careful. I have been thinking about what the Eastern records say about the Ash Bloodline ability and emotional proximity. Celine told me about that section. I have been thinking about what it means for the ward work, and what it means for the other thing. Which other thing? The thing that is not about ward lines. I looked at him. I am not managing this, I am telling you directly. The thing that is not about ward lines is growing at approximately the same rate as my ability to say so out loud. Which is to say, slowly, but consistently.
I know.
Do you know what it is? Yes. Tell me what you think it is so I can tell you if I agree. It is what happens when two people spend a very long time in each other's presence doing things that matter together, and learning each other the way you learned something you want to understand completely. Not the useful parts, the whole thing. He was quiet for a moment. That is what I think too. Good. It is going to keep growing. I know. I am not going to manage that. Good. The fire was warm. The spring night was cold outside. The ward lines of the Northern Territory were recognizing themselves one old connection at a time, slowly, the way the right things heal. He reached over. He took my hand, palm over mine, steady, the way it had been at the border stone in the frost, in the pine forest, at the beginning of this. We sat by the fire in the east wing in the court that had become something neither of us had expected. I thought about the girl who had stood at the village well watching 4 riders come up the road, who had thought, something bad is already on its way and the only useful thing I can do is see it coming first. I thought about how wrong I was, not about the riders, not about the morning, not about the size of what was coming toward me, wrong about the direction. What was coming was not coming for me the way something bad comes for a person who has learned to brace. What was coming toward me the way the land comes toward the person it has been waiting for, the way the spring comes toward the winter, not to end it, not to conquer it, to complete it. The Eastern delegation is signed. Marin is in the archive. Seraphine is in the healing rooms learning something new. Celine is telling the truth. The ward lines are moving. I am in the East Wing library most mornings, in the window seat with the good light, with an old book or a new letter from the Eastern family I did not know I had, or the notebook I have been keeping since the first day. And he knocks on the door now instead of standing in the corridor. And when I call him in, he comes. This is a small thing. It is the whole thing. I am not afraid of taking up the room. I have not been for some time. I am not certain of the exact day it changed, but the day has passed, and I am here taking up the room, and the room has enough space in it for everything I am. I am not afraid of this. I am not afraid of any of it. That is the whole story in the smallest sentence I have. Please like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments which moment, which line, which chapter stayed with you. There are more stories like this one waiting. I will see you in the next one. Stay seen, stay believed. Stay in the rooms where the people inside them look at you like you are something the land has been waiting for.